Hello, Mikaela, and welcome to the Dandelion podcast. So listeners, today we've got Mikaela with us and we're going to be talking a bit about sobriety. So I'm just going to hand it back to you for a second. Can you give us a bit of an intro, just a bit about yourself, any hobbies?
Hey, first of all, so lovely
in real life.
to meet in real life, so to speak, because obviously you and I met online about 2 years ago now.
Crazy.
Yeah, time has absolutely flown. Yeah, so my name's Mikaela Ebbesson. I am from Sweden originally, but I haven't lived there since I was about 7. I grew up with quite an alternative sort of lifestyle, which I feel has kind of led me to where I am today, but in a very roundabout way. So after moving from Sweden at the age of 7, me and my mum, who was a single parent, moved to India, which is like a huge culture change. And she was on a sort of a spiritual journey. And since then, up until I think I turned sort of 18 or up until I went to university, I went to 13 different schools. We moved around multiple times a year. I've lived in hundreds of different houses, caravans, stately homes, anywhere you can possibly imagine. And it led to me really unknowingly being in a constant state of kind of survival mode. My mum also has struggled with a lot of mental health challenges, and being a kind of a carer for her meant that I didn't have a chance to find out who I was. Life felt very scary, very intimidating. And I really turned inwards, and I have been really my own worst enemy in the fact that I've always felt that I'm different, that I don't fit in, which I didn't. You know, that's what it is. I didn't fit in, you know. So I tried very hard to mold myself into whatever I thought other people wanted me to be. And when obviously I found alcohol at quite a young teenage age, I felt, wow, here is this magic serum that allows me to feel like I fit in a little bit better, like I've got a voice. I can join in. I think that's what it was, because I've always had such a loud inner world where I criticize myself heavily, and I'm very insecure. And that's something that I'm still working on now. But yeah, I got into a career in advertising for 12 years, again, thinking that that's what I should do. That's what society expected of me. I don't come from any sort of money or anything. My mum and I were homeless multiple times growing up. And she also sent me to a lot of expensive private schools that she couldn't afford to pay for. And so I was also having to kind of mask myself in those situations and pretend like I fitted in there. But it's kind of turned me into a bit of a chameleon, and it meant that I was kind of good at faking it till I made it in the advertising world. And it meant that I was kind of good at pretending like I came from money. And I've found a lot of ways to keep doing that into my adult years, until I woke up one day and I was 30 years old and I didn't know who I was, and I hated myself and nothing was working out. And so that's a really confused roundabout way to telling you how I got to where I am now.
No, thank you for sharing that. That's such a crazy story, like such a crazy beginning.
It's a lot. There's so much in there, and I still haven't mastered how to condense it.
Yeah.
For a situation like this. And I think that sitting and thinking about it for too long makes me uncomfortable, and that's another reason why I don't kind of practice that sort of intro part, because it's where I've got the most work to do, I think, still.
And that's fair enough, because it's good to stay in the present and all of that, so as we know. So then what do you do now? Are you happy to share like what your job is?
The last few years, I've kind of gone back and forth, and you know, what should I do? I've jumped jobs so many times. I used to call myself the job gypsy, you know, because I just didn't feel like I fitted ever. And I thought, well, you know, maybe if I find a different advertising agency, maybe, you know, if I basically doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result, right? But I just wasn't getting it. I wasn't understanding why it wasn't working and why I was feeling just so rubbish and burnt out, and why I was spending all my evenings at the pub or in a lock-in, or constantly being addicted to dating and different things to kind of distract myself from the very real and true situation, which was I'm not happy and I don't know what I'm doing and I don't have a support network. So what am I doing now? Well, I left advertising. I kind of went back to it. I went back to it. I left over the years. And once I got into recovery, which was in early 2021, it was in January, which is when you and I met, I decided to do my 90 meetings in 90 days as part of AA, which I'm no longer a part of now, but I'm very grateful for that time, because I met some amazing people like yourself. It was the first time when I learned how to start sharing the inner world that I had worked so damn hard to hide. I had become very good at, I worked in advertising sales towards the end, and that's all bullshit, right? And it's talking a good talk and a good game, and I got really good at that. But I was not good at expressing my true self and my feelings and emotions. And that's what AA is so good for, because you walk into a room full of strangers and you've got to bite the bullet and step out of that comfort zone. And that's so important. And so once I realized that, wow, once I got started, I couldn't really stop. And I was like, I think I'm actually quite good at expressing myself. I've always enjoyed writing and things like that, but that's a bit different. I've never verbally kind of put myself out there in a genuine way, and when I did, I realized that it was something I really enjoyed, and so that brought me on to taking some courses in recovery coaching to hopefully help some other humans who are similar to myself. So I'm starting out now working with fellow women. I only work with women, and that's because I feel like I have the most to share with women. I have walked a similar path, and I think it's important to not have any distractions. And as many of us do learn in early recovery, especially a part of AA or NA or any of those situations, there are times when we get approached in ways that's inappropriate. It kind of comes with the territory. So to protect myself and to make sure that I'm doing the best work, I only work with women. But yeah, it's...
Do you do that full time now? Or?
So I am still kind of starting out. I'm rewriting my program at the moment. It's a work in progress, but yeah, that is something that I would like to go full time into. As it looks now, I've got my YouTube channel that I'm slowly growing, and that was another huge step out of my comfort zone for me. But it's when I first got into recovery and I first met you, and I was heartbroken and I was so down and out, and I didn't have any family here, no friends, because it was Christmas during the pandemic. There was nobody around, and I felt so lonely, and I thought, gosh, all I've got really is myself and my laptop in a small rented room that I'd found pretty much overnight. So my environment was very foreign to me as well, but I looked online for people that I could connect with, and I looked on YouTube to try to find someone I could kind of relate to, and there wasn't really anyone who was openly talking about this stuff. And so I thought, well, screw it, why don't I put myself out there then? And I don't know much about editing. I don't know anything about editing. I don't know much about doing YouTube as a whole, but I thought I'm just going to learn by doing. And now I've created like a small but perfectly formed community, and I love everybody who's taken the time to kind of join in with that so far and watch it. But yeah.
Yes, so as you said, we haven't actually ever met in person before, which is so funny, because it's really weird, because I do feel like I know you, because we, I'll give you some background. Like you said, we met in AA over Zoom, not in real life.
Yeah, of course, that's worth mentioning.
Yeah. So AA for me has been something that I've dipped in and out of.
Right.
But yeah, I've mentioned very briefly in other podcasts, sort of in passing, that I've been sober for, it's now 2 years and 1 month.
Yes.
So it was literally just like slightly before you, but such like similar timing. So I I've dipped in and out of AA. I haven't fully embraced it. I feel like it's something that I'm definitely I want to do the steps at some point, and I actually want to see if I can find a group that I really connect with.
Yeah, that's important.
For me, I found, apart from you, not really any, I don't know. I think there's a lot of stuff. I think I find it very difficult to be in groups, and particularly to be vulnerable in groups. So for me, it's like, because one, I was like, can I even admit that I have an alcohol problem? Can I do that? One, I couldn't find that. I found that so incredibly difficult to even admit at the beginning. And then to talk about it with strangers, in a group, I was like, and then there's just so much. So I was like, okay, found that really difficult. So for me, I've done my recovery more via listening to podcasts, reading the books, doing a lot of meditation, all of that stuff. So, but I think AA is an amazing
resource.
System. It is.
Yeah.
And it's always there as well, which I think is so comforting. So yeah, it's definitely not something I would rule out. So we met through AA, and then we've just kind of stayed in touch, haven't we? Kind of over Instagram, basically. Yeah. And you've been doing some amazing stuff with your recovery account, which I'm so in awe of, because I know how much it takes to start a social media account and be good at keeping up with it and all of that stuff, and particularly if it's something very personal to you. So I'm fully so proud of you for that.
Thank you.
So this is the first time we've met in real life. It's very exciting, but it does feel like we've known each other for a while anyway.
It does.
So I wondered if you've kind of touched on it a little bit already, but if you could just tell us a little bit more about sort of your decision to decide to become sober, what led you to that, and how that's kind of...
So I've always felt that there's more to life. There's something for me at the end of this tunnel that I'm supposed to do. Like, I'm just not where I'm supposed to be. I've always felt that, and it's like an itch. It's like an uncomfortable itch, or just feeling claustrophobic in yourself. And that feeling was growing year by year, and each relationship that didn't work out, knowing that, I had to grow up as a child very fast. And, my mum tried to take her own life, sadly, when I was 14. And there was only me and her. There was no other kind of adult support. And I used to say to myself that, I'm strong. I just worked past those things, and, I got on with it. But truth be told, I was in fight or flight for my whole life. And like I said, life felt very scary. Life was scary because it wasn't this could happen. It's this freaking has happened, and it can happen again. And people that you love can leave very fast. And when you've only got your mum, that's your whole world.
It's terrifying.
And to hear her saying she doesn't want to be in this world anymore and that she wants to leave me, that's quite haunting. And I carried that unbeknowingly, I think. And all of the stuff with school and just not feeling like I fitted in. And that led me to, drinking very heavily and socially. So I kind of banned myself from drinking at home on my own a few years before I finally quit drinking altogether. And I managed to stick to that pretty much. Yeah. Because I didn't want to be at home. I wanted to be out. I wanted to be escaping myself. The worst thing ever would be being at home. So to me, that made sense anyway, because I was always out. And I lived in a shared house, so it was good to be out. And so I would very quickly fall into relationships, because when I went on dates, I was drinking a lot. And even if I didn't like the person, if there's red flags, whatever, I would just drink through it to have a good time. And that then creates a false connection, a false relationship. You release all sorts of different hormones and chemicals that can lead you to believe that you're in love. And so I used relationships, I think, as an escape, but I also used them to create my own sort of family. I think it was always my comfort, was my partner, and I put them on a pedestal, and I was always way below them. I never felt like I measured up. I've been physically very insecure as well. You know, I could not walk around naked, even with partners that I lived with. You know, I was so self-aware, so insecure. And so as relationship after relationship broke down, and it wasn't just because of drinking, you know, it was a case of a lot of the time I would get bored, because it should never turn into a relationship to start with. Or we did have a lot of arguments because there was too much drinking. But at the same time, the same stuff's going on with my work, you know, like I'm feeling worn out, stressed out, unhappy, no love for my career whatsoever. So I'm drinking whenever I can. I'm hungover all the time, spending a horrible amount of money on Ubers and Uber Eats, and it's getting worse, and it starts to snowball. And now all it takes, you know, I'm in my late 20s, and all it takes now is a couple of glasses of wine and I'm in blackout. And everything is continuing as it was. During this time, there's no hobbies, there's no interests. You know, I've always known that I'm really into music, and there's loads of things that I would love to work myself up to do, in terms of like finding courage to get my motorbike license or any of those things. None of that stuff's happened. Nothing. I've not even really bought myself anything that nice. You know, like all of my money and time went into drinking or recovering from drinking. And when you live in London, it's normalised, especially when you work in advertising, for example. And so it just kept rolling on. And I kept thinking to myself, like, what is it that's not work? What is it? Because I know I'm a good person deep down. I know I've got good intentions. I know that I'm creative. I know all these things, but I'm just not getting anywhere. And then 2020, I got into a relationship that I probably shouldn't have, but it was a pinnacle moment for me. It was just after the lockdown had kind of eased. I got into this fast and hard relationship. I ended up living with this person. I put all my eggs in their basket, and you know, they said, you know, don't work for a while, you know, like take this time to really find yourself. But as soon as that relationship didn't work out, a few months later, I was kind of kicked to the curb, and I woke up on Boxing Day, you know, the 26th of December 2020, and all of a sudden I didn't have a home, I didn't have a boyfriend, I didn't have a job, and I didn't have any support network. And that was my rock bottom. And that's when I felt, wow, like this is wrong. And I'm the instigator of this. Like I have somehow got myself here. I've got to get myself out of this. And the only thing I could think of in that moment that I could change, that might have the effect that I wanted, was to remove the alcohol, because I knew there was times when people have mentioned it to me, like partners, never friends, because I was functioning. I was fun most of the time, you know. I seemed fine, probably. You know, I was 2 stone heavier than I am now, and I was constantly a bit of a sweaty mess, and like all that, because it comes with the territory, yeah, it does. Right? It comes with the territory. And so even now, just looking at me now, like people can see the difference. It's you know. So yeah, that was my rock bottom. That's what kind of caused me to wake up. Like I needed a jolt. I needed a shock to the system to be like, right, this is the fork in the road. What are you gonna do? Because I'd watched Mum go through some really tough times, and I know that I'm more likely to suffer from some of those challenges as well, because it can be inherited. But you can obviously, if you live your life a certain way and you practice mindfulness and you're, you know, healthy and all those things, and if you have a good supportive network around you, the chances are that those things aren't going to happen. But when you're drinking and you don't know what's going to happen to your mind, you know, it can get really twisted really fast. So yeah, that was enough to get me to where I am now.
Yeah, that's a lot. And I wish that this is me kind of looking back with retrospect, and obviously I met you like a month after that. I just wish that I could have been a bit more of some kind of support for you, because we were in such a similar situation.
Yeah.
But I think about this, I was going through a difficult time obviously too, because I was getting sober, and I just lost my cat, who was like my best friend.
Oh yes, yeah. I remember.
I was in a horrible state about that.
Yeah.
And so I think, I didn't have the emotional capacity that I couldn't
of
have been.
course.
But in my head, I always have a little bit of and hearing you say what kind of situation you were in, I wish that I could have been more of a support there. But retrospect.
Like you say, we were in a very similar situation, and you know that early on,
leading the blind, maybe
a little bit, yeah. And it was the first time where I'd ever started actually speaking. I cannot stand this phrase, but I'm going to say it because I can't think of a different another word. But it was the first time I'd like spoken my truth.
Yeah.
And so and with friends as well. I don't think I knew how to navigate friendships. I don't think I knew what a healthy friendship was. In my friendships, there was so much unsaid. There was so many elephants in those rooms. You know, the only times we would talk would be after a couple of glasses of wine or more. And so with you, even like we probably wouldn't even have known how to have that kind of vulnerable conversation, because that's not normal. Now it is.
Yeah.
Now it's like, now I go for coffee with friends and talk about feelings and emotions. Back then, if there was not a drink at the end of that plan to meet up with a friend, I wasn't going to do it.
Exactly.
Meeting up for coffee, like what
It's so funny. How does sobriety do that? It's like you kind of go from having to have like a million drinks to be able to talk about your emotions to like, we just met in person for the first time in 2 minutes within meeting and having a coffee. We were like, yeah, I mean, this brings back memories. We're talking about emotions. We're talking about like breakups, and we're like, it's so good.
It's literally the first thing. And I text my friends now and I ask them like, you know, how they're feeling. And when I text them that, they know that I'm genuinely interested about how they're doing in that day, even if it's not good, you know, like I want to hear about it. And I also express love for friends now and appreciation and gratitude. I could not have done that before. Like, no, that's so uncomfortable, you know, like weird.
It's the same as me.
How
it's so
freaking
funny.
weird.
Before I got sober, my family were very much like, I just didn't really do like affection or like I could never cry, so like literally
that was the worst.
Sort of just like, I'm incredibly sad, by the way, guys, I just can't actually physically cry. Whereas now I'm like,
I well up at everything. But I mean, I've also learned about myself that I'm a highly sensitive person. That's like a whole right. So we're incredibly empathetic and now, and it gets worse. I'm going to say worse because it really has been, like, especially this last week. I got a text from my previous cleaner. No, I text my cleaner from my previous flat where I've just moved from, and she's a wonderful lady. She's very special, but she's had a tough time. And I just wanted to say some words. I was like, you know, I appreciate we moved like a month ago. It was such a whirlwind, you know, apologies, but I just wanted to say, you know, I really appreciate everything, blah, blah, blah. And she sent me the most beautiful text back. And Otto, my partner, was like, oh, why don't you read it out to me? And I was like, yeah. So I was like, hi, Mikaela. And he's like, what are you doing? And I was like, I'm welling up. I'm okay. He was like, why? I was like, I don't know. But if I can sense emotion from like the other party, or if someone's going through something, it just comes. And I think because we've worked so hard to be so closed off and to not feel and to deflect and whatever, once we let that wall come down, the floodgates are just open, and it's so overwhelming. And I think that's why it takes like a good 2 years to start to find the balance, right? Because that's where I feel I am now. And with the coaching stuff, for example, like I just want to say, you know, you can go and find a recovery coach or a sober coach who's been sober or in recovery for 15 to 20 years or something like that. Of course, amazing if that's what inspires you. The reason why I'm putting myself out there, even though maybe I don't have, you know, like a decade behind me, is because I can help get people as far as I am now. And I have changed my life more than I can say. The ripple effect is huge, you know, and it's not just mentally, it's physically, it's friendships, it's work, it's everything. So yeah, wow.
Yeah. People say that addiction is but a symptom. So you kind of go into like, you know, you kind of go into recovery. I think most people do. And you think that alcohol's the problem. And then you realise quite quickly, maybe not everyone, but for me, I know that I kind of went, okay, cool, get rid of the alcohol, sorted. Then it just peels back like more and more layers of things, and like it's still doing that 2 years on. Like I'm still, you know, like you said, I'm similar with the highly sensitive personality.
Yeah.
And which I now realise was probably a huge factor in why I drank, because I was just not okay with feeling that many like feelings and energies.
Coping mechanism for sure.
But have you ever got to like the why? Have you ever got to why it really was that you drank, or do you think it was an amalgamation of factors?
Yeah, I think I have got to the why, and it's not like a simple black and white why, but what I say to people, especially in early recovery, is that, rightly said, you can remove the alcohol, but you'll quickly find that alcohol was never your problem. And recovery really lies in self-discovery, whether we like it or not. As soon as we remove our comfort blanket, you really can't help but start the kind of self-discovery journey, because it's all on an emotional level for me. It was my way to cope with the world. You know, the world is very loud and very intense, and when you are sensitive and you've got a sensitive nervous system, or you've had trauma, which we all have in varying degrees, it's all relative, but when you've had that, the world can become too much, and alcohol helps dull that down. And when you remove that, it's very important to not just leave it there. And I think that if we're all honest with each other, once we remove the alcohol, we know that that's not the be all and end all. We can feel it, because I look in the recovery support groups a lot, and people are writing, I'm 5 months in, or 5 weeks in, 5 days in. Why do I still feel so shit? Why has nothing changed? And it's, well, you're still not looking at the shadows that are screaming at you in the back of your head. Like, if there are things that are uncomfortable to think about, there's the why. And what I say to people is, even if they're starting to think about maybe trying out recovery or sobriety, or however you want to put it, keep drinking for now if that's really what you want to do. Keep drinking, but start to pay attention, start listening to yourself, start noticing triggers, start noticing habits and behaviors. So what do you find stressful? What sort of conversations do you find triggering? And when you are triggered, what's your go-to? What coping mechanisms and what little habits are coming out? Because for me, sitting back now and viewing the world through my alcohol-free eyes, no beer goggles, you've only got to sit in the pub past 11 p.m. or 10 p.m., 9 p.m., whatever, and watch the carnage unfold to understand what's going on here. Everybody is so insecure. Everybody's so self-aware. Everybody wants to fit in, to be seen a certain way, to be loved and accepted, and that's what we're doing. I thought of a funny scenario early on in recovery, of something that plays out in clubs or like bars. When you go into the girls' toilets, and you've got an amalgamation of different characters in there, but there'll always be one or two that want to compliment you or bond with you, and like, oh, I love your earring. Oh my god, that's us wanting to connect. It's seeking connection, and it's quite sad and desperate. Why else would we be talking to strangers in a toilet if we don't want to be seen or heard or connect in some way? And so the why is pretty similar for us all, I think. And once we realize that, and once we start paying attention to ourselves and just listening, it's really revolutionary. But it's also incredibly scary and intimidating. And just know this. The one thing I say is, just know this. When it feels uncomfortable, that's when change is happening. When it feels uncomfortable and we don't fall back into those go-to behaviors, those habits, those negative things, or drinking or whatever, that's when we are actually working on ourselves. Even if it doesn't feel like we're physically changing anything, just staying in that moment and feeling uncomfortable and not doing what we did before. Do it different. Do anything different. And you'll start to see a change happen. Yeah.
Don't you find that it's the things that you keep trying to avoid? So you're like, yeah, I need to work on that, sure. And like, you just keep kind of like, you're like, no, cool, I will work on that at some point. But it's almost like, for me, I found like the universe will literally be like, could you work on this? And you're like, no, thanks, not now.
Yeah.
And then it's like, could you work on this? And you're like, no, it's okay. And then it's literally hitting you around the face with it.
It
It's
keeps happening, yeah.
Like, you're going to need to, because otherwise you're not going to learn, you're not going to grow. Like, I feel, you know, that's a whole big part of emotional sobriety. And it, you know, when you said about people that have been however many months sober and they still feel like shit, like, that's kind of how I did when I did my first couple of stints. I would be like, I still feel crap, and I'm not enjoying this, to be honest. Like, to be fair, I had just recovered from glandular fever, so I kind of had like a bit of a weird, I wasn't getting any of the physical, like, lovely benefits. I was just kind of still feeling rubbish. So that was difficult. But I think, emotional sobriety, working on yourself, getting to the root of why is really like the key. It kind of annoys me sometimes because I'm like things have come up recently for me and I'm like, no, I'm done working on myself. Can you not? I'm done with this. Like, I'm fine.
It's a good point, because so for example, last year, I got into like a new friendship with somebody who turned out to be very controlling, judgmental and manipulative. And there I was thinking, wait, like, I've done so much work in terms of romantic relationships. You know, I mean, my first ever relationship that I got into without alcohol, with just hours of talking and going for walks and like getting to know each other, wholesome. I mean, different. But then, oh my gosh, I've just let this super toxic person into my life who tells me what lipstick I can and can't wear, who tells me, you know, who I can and can't be in relationships with. And I'm allowing this. So that hit me pretty hard. And when I finally set some boundaries with said person, it did not go down well, because of course then it's going to be a huge shock to their system. This person and I should never have gotten into a friendship relationship. And to start with, I could see the red flags were there, but I ignored it because I needed companionship. I was so lonely at the time. It was like early recovery again. But that's when I was like, oh, you see, like, I've done some work here, but I'm still not, So friendships for me is a really, really, really big and complex area that I think I'm kind of working on now. And I'm kind of trying to think about friendships much the same as romantic relationships. Like, what do I want out of this? What positive can I bring? And like, what does friendship look like to me? What are my values? And do my friends reflect those values back to me? If not, I've probably got to do a bit of work there. And so I went on a new friend date 3 days ago from Bumble BFF, because I now am no longer afraid or ashamed to say, I don't have a huge supportive friends group. I've never allowed for it, but also I don't like big groups of people, and my life is not a Hollywood movie, and I can actually have friendships that work for me. Yeah. Maybe just like hang out one-on-one, or like three of us tops. More than that, you know? Yeah. Whereas I was always trying to fit into whatever I thought culture wanted to see from me, which was like being the popular girl in a big friend group and to have like the job in media and to like, none of that is for me. None of that is for me.
And they say, that actually brings me very nicely on to one of my, the main, you know, the overarching theme of the podcast is connection, obviously.
Okay, yeah.
It's very thinly kind of connected, but so the overarching theme being connection. A lot of people have said, and I'm going to give credit to a podcast here that I completely rely on, and I need to send them emails and messages about how much I love them, because I haven't, but I listen to them so religiously. So Recovery Elevator, I don't know if you've ever listened to it. It's an American.
Oh, now I feel bad. No, I haven't. No, I'm sorry.
But it's so good. So the guy that runs it, Paul Churchill, he has said, and I don't know whether it's his view or someone else's, that they say that connection is the opposite of addiction. Yeah. So when you were saying about friendships, I was thinking that's so true. And I know that for myself, this is kind of part of the reason why I started this podcast, is because I do find connecting with people quite difficult, just as someone that is like very energy sensitive. I like connecting with people. I enjoy having friendships, I really value my friendships. I really value all of my relationships. But I also find it so difficult because I think as someone that is energy sensitive, you're picking up everyone else's stuff.
Yeah.
And also if you're like me, I'm quite insecure, I will be like, I'll come away from literally any meeting, any interaction, and I'll be like,
they
hate
me. They hated me.
They
I know.
They hate me. They thought it was like this, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, so speaking of that, how have your kind of friendships and your relationships then changed since you've gotten sober?
The biggest change, of course, is me. I don't have that many friends who I spent time with before, if that makes sense. I've started again in many ways, and I think some friendships in the longer term may find their way back. I don't know.
Did you instigate that?
It's a complicated one with that side of things, because it wasn't just kind of my side or their side. It's like years of just not speaking about feelings and emotions, and then starting to feel quite a lot of sort of animosity quietly for one another, I think. Because that's what happens. If you don't set boundaries and you don't speak honestly and openly with your friends, you start to almost resent them. Like, why aren't you supporting me? Why do I feel lonely? Well, you know, if you're never expressing that's how you feel.
Mind readers.
Yeah, and people are also then gonna assume that you are the strong one, like you've always portrayed. But not only that, a lot of my friends at the time also didn't have the tools to think this way either. So a lot of us have been very self-absorbed and haven't honestly been there for one another and honestly listened and paid attention to how each other are feeling. And so I have had to kind of rebuild a little bit, but also find new connections that speak to who I am now. And the beauty of that is that we don't have to feel like we need to undo anything from the past, or we need to apologize for anything. It's a clean slate, and we're allowed a clean slate. You know, there's not a whole history of debauchery and complete carnage and horrible things that I've done. There's been things that I feel shame and regret for. And that's enough for me. But I think where the most work sits is definitely connecting with myself, changing the inner narrative to a positive one, because I allow that negative narrative in, like self-harm sometimes, you know, even if we're looking in the mirror and we're picking faults with our face, whatever it is, because I do that daily. I now try to change my routine so that when I first look in the mirror in the morning, I force myself to say something positive, even if I don't feel it. Because we need to just start doing things differently, out of our comfort zone, no matter what. And that definitely includes connecting with people. And for me, connecting with women especially, they've scared the shit out of me. Excuse my French. My whole life, really. Because I'd never felt much love from women, especially not at work. So I've had to really find the beauty in female connection, and yeah, it's pretty cool. I'm really glad that I'm doing this in my 30s.
Yeah. So preferably in your 30s rather than your 20s?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look, if I'd gone about life a different way, maybe I'd be a multi-millionaire now, super successful doing something. I don't know. But I wouldn't change it, because... And it's so cliche, it's cringe, but I wouldn't be who I am now. And I think who I am now is pretty cool, because now I feel genuine, and I feel like I can have an honest conversation with you, for example, and show up and actually, be a caring, genuine person. It feels so good that I wouldn't trade that for a few shots of tequila. You know, like, it's so addictive finding yourself and figuring yourself out and self-development and stuff, if you just allow yourself, you know? Don't you think?
Yeah, completely. Getting sober in your 30s, so I'm similar. I think I got sober when I was 31, And
How old are you now?
33, but I'm going to be 34 this year.
Oh, so am I.
Oh,
so
nice.
Yeah, we're both 89 babies, aren't we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
How did we get here?
So weird. So getting sober in your 30s is, in one hand, it's kind of a good time, because a lot of people are maybe more settled, maybe more, I don't know. I think we're lucky in the sense that there is more talk about recovery, sobriety particularly in the last 5 years. You know, when I first looked up about getting sober, was probably, I think it might have been around 2016, which is shows that it took me quite a while to get there. But you know, no shade on myself. But
that wasn't even on my radar in 2016. Like, so I mean, I would applaud that.
It was on my radar. It was very much not a thing, but it was just like that. I just remember there not being anything else out there. Now you've got podcasts, you've got books, you've got people speaking openly about it.
Especially since the pandemic, I've got to say, it did a lot of good as much as it did bad.
For sure. But it is still, even though, you know, maybe our peers are more settled, etc., maybe we are more open-minded, because of how entrenched alcohol is in our culture.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, probably not just British culture. I mean, so many different cultures, which is crazy, because I have to just note, and I want this to be, I'm going to sort of shoehorn this fact into this podcast, because I want people to know this. The World Health Organization has said that there's no amount of alcohol that is healthy or okay for you. That's a fact. This is something that, you know, we could talk about loads. I could talk about big alcohol and all of that stuff quite a lot, but that will take us, like, we need a whole other podcast for that.
Yes.
But my point being, is so entrenched in our culture, it's basically everywhere. Have you found that to be a challenge, or have you... or what challenges have you faced since you've been sober?
I haven't struggled with it at all, and I know that is a pretty lucky thing. But then also, I was also very lucky. Way too many alsos and luckies. I was lucky that, or smart, when I timed myself. Oh my God, get your words out. When I started out in recovery, it was very close to the pandemic sort of time, and it meant that most people still weren't going out. I think pubs may even still have been closed. And so of course that gave me space away, and I didn't feel like I was missing out. But equally, when everything kind of reopened, and ever since, I haven't felt the draw to do it, because I found my why. Because I know where I don't want to end up, and there's a sure way to get there, and I'm not going to go down that road. And also, there literally is nothing to gain, like you said, from drinking alcohol. It's poison. Now, marketing is a fantastic thing. It's a very manipulative thing. I've worked in the industry long enough to know you work in it too. There is a good side and a bad side, of course. But we are all brainwashed. And if, you know, people don't want to accept it, your doctor was telling you to smoke cigarettes not long ago, so get a grip. Cigarettes. And for sure, you know, there's actually a huge cigarette and alcohol factory just down the road here, and there's the brewery opposite as well. That's now actually shut down, which I thought, like, yes, it's nice to see that we're moving a little bit, and like, fair enough, people are like vaping now rather than smoking and like those kind of things, and people are slowly starting to wake up to the fact that, like, oh, okay, health matters. And there's mental health as well. And alcohol isn't too good for those things. And most of us have anxiety, and it plays on my anxiety. So, like, people are starting to understand that we are very much controlled and manipulated by the powers that be. And like you say, we can go down that rabbit hole for hours on end. But if people just start to pay attention to their inner world a little bit more, pay attention to your triggers, pay attention to your feelings and emotions and what behaviors come off the back of that, and you're already halfway to feeling better and being a better person. Simply drowning ourselves in booze and running away, which is what that is, doesn't lead to anywhere good. And it's so much more badass and rock and roll turning up somewhere like as yourself, stone cold sober, and still like showing up and like bringing that energy. I think that for me feels like what I was trying to create before. You know, I would date musicians, and like I worked a 9-to-5 office job, and I would be out at night burning the candle at both ends, pretending like I was some freaking rock star. There was nothing less rock star about my life, really. And this is genuinely, I think, the coolest I've ever felt, to be able to actually do something and stick to it. Everybody knows how hard that is. Everybody knows how hard that is. And I can finally say, like, yeah, I'm proud of this. But I'm still very quick to be like, yeah, but whatever, it's just recovery, it's fine. Like, it's still uncomfortable to be like, I achieved something.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. Because I'm so used to not a lot happening, just same old life over and over. And yeah, I think I went off on a tangent.
I think it is very cool. And I think it's very, like you say, it's almost rebellious now to become sober. I know that's not why we did it. That's not why I maintain my sobriety. Like, I'm not like, rebel. I'm a rebel. I mean, I'm super uncool. So. But like,
not true.
I think it's, you know, thank you. I found it really hard. I'm really impressed that you kind of were like, whatever, this is me now. For me, the people pleasing side of me and wanting to be the fun girl, being the party girl, like that was I held a lot of my identity in that.
Yes, that's the hard part.
I was like, when everyone's used to you being the one that wants to get drunk and go out and go hard, like, and you go, I'm not drinking anymore. That was painful for me because I'm such a people pleaser. I'm like, I want people to like me. I want people to think I'm the most fun person ever. So like, I honestly was just like, how will I ever be able to tell people? But, you know, in general, people are quite supportive. Yeah. I'd say I've had a few people that weren't.
Of course.
But I think we learned that that's usually a reflection of how they feel about their own drinking habits, and that, you know, they find it a little bit of a affront that you've
jarring
to,
for people. But yeah, you're right, actually, because that's what I was going to get to before I went off on a tangent. As much as I haven't so much struggled with the, you know, staying away from booze and not drinking it, for me, it's the emotional side. It's the inner kind of monologue. You know, how am I gonna, who am I, first of all? And how am I going to show up to social situations? Like, how's that going to look? And even more so, like, when I first went into recovery, like, I stripped myself of everything. I sold all the coats from, like, going out. You know, I used to, like, love, like, my bright orange coat or, like, my big black fluffy. Like, I used to enjoy kind of getting ready to, like, putting that mask on and going out and whatever. I stripped myself of all of that. I didn't wear makeup for, like, a year. I wore baggy jeans. And then I hit a point, and it was only this year, well, actually now we're in 2023, it was only 2022 when I realised, oh, I can still be those other parts of myself. I can put that back in my identity, so to speak. It's like, I can still be sexy. I can still have fun and, you know, dance like an idiot if I want to. But it takes time to kind of put those things back in and to put some things in for the first time. I actually never did have confidence for real. It was all alcohol. I've never shown up anywhere confident just as me. Whereas now I'm able to put that in and to feel what that feels like for the first time, rather than like, I need to go to the bar and get that drink as quick as possible so that I feel able to have this conversation. You know? Yeah. So the difficult part is identity. Who am I? How do I want to reintroduce myself to the world? Are these friendships that I'm happy with? And wait, if this person is projecting and saying, you know, why am I not drinking, blah, 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 like, do I want that in my life? Or what does that mean? Like, so many things you've got to, like, work through and figure out, you know, what works for us as individuals. And yeah, that's probably taken about 2 years, I would say, to start getting to grips with that. Yeah.
And like you say, with the confidence thing, the innate confidence you can get from saying you're going to do something, however hard it is, and actually going through with it, that is real confidence. And the confidence you get from sobriety, I'm still not very confident, but confidence in myself has never been higher, because I can actually say, I want to do this, I need to do this, and I've gone through it, and whatever's happened, whatever reaction I've got from anyone, whatever awkward situation, all of that, stayed true to it for now. Yeah. So I like to do one day at a time.
Yeah.
Which I've got on my little bracelet here, actually.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, that confidence is real, it's authentic, and it doesn't have to come from a bottle. Like, that's how I was as well. I was like, I'm like, yeah, sure, I'm the fun party girl, but at what cost? And also, it's not real. Like,
no,
it's not real.
I'm actually like I'm a raging introvert.
Yeah.
And now embrace that.
Yeah.
But yeah, you are right. It's really, really confusing to start with, and people are naturally going to react in different ways as well, and that can be difficult. Like I said, for me, it was kind of different because I took myself out of my previous life. I literally stepped out of it. I physically lived in a different location. I started different work and developed a lot of new friendships and relationships. So like my world looks very different, and not everybody's family lives in a different country. You know, like I could literally just change everything. I have that ability because I was a single woman living in London. Not everybody has that, and I'm aware of that. But that comes at a cost, not having a support network of anything that's familiar. And I think that probably lengthened this for me as well. The initial year was harder, I think, than it maybe had to be in many different ways, because I was literally on my own. I didn't have a lot of resources available. Yeah. What a whirlwind.
Yeah, it's crazy. I think I always, however hard recovery is, I always think, at the end of the day, it's just you, like you said a bit at the beginning. It's you, it's your body. You're the one that has to live with yourself, live in your brain. You're the one that's going to be at the end of your life looking back. Like, I know it's quite morbid, but
it's true though.
Everyone can have their opinions. There can be so much noise, there can be marketing, there can be whatever, but you are the one that has to live in your brain and your body. So you've got to do what is right for you at the end of the day. And it sounds like you have done that, so that's great. We have literally run out of time. I don't even know how it's gone that quickly. It's mental. So I'm just going to, if we could just wrap up by you giving us a bit of info about where people can find you. Tell us a little bit about Recovery with Me.
Yeah.
And what you're hoping for the future.
So Recovery with Me, like I said, came out of me searching around frantically on the internet, trying to find people to connect with, to find similar people to myself that I could resonate with. And when I couldn't find that, I thought maybe it's time to put myself out there. And actually, I had a podcast that I started with the friend that I mentioned year before last. And that was another step, as well as AA, that got me used to speaking more openly. And so when it came to starting my YouTube last year, it wasn't as much of a big step because I'd already started practicing a little bit and being open and speaking and being used to seeing myself on camera and all the uncomfortable stuff. So yeah, I started Recovery with Me, and I don't know if people that follow me know this, but Recovery with Me is, the me is my initials, Mikaela Ebbesson.
Oh.
So it's kind of like I want it to be like Recovery with Me in terms of recovery starts with yourself, but also me as a coach, and yeah, my name. I just thought that brought it together really nicely. So I'm Recovery with Me, all one word. I don't know why I chose to do it that way on YouTube. And on Instagram, it's Recovery with, which is recoverywth.me. Very complicated. All the other ones were taken. I don't know. I'm not great at social media, but I do try to keep up with the YouTube stuff because I think that kind of long form video is so good to connect with people who are feeling a little bit low and they just want to have like a friend that they can listen to. Not that like snappy short noise. That's not, I can't do that. Not, especially not on YouTube. I don't have the know-how, and maybe because I'm in my 30s, but I don't know how you do your amazing reels and stuff. I can't. I'm just like blah, 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 blah for like half an hour. That's fine. I can do that, upload it.
See, I do the short thing, but trying to be open, like that's why this podcast is happening. So I'm like, I'm going to talk on camera about vulnerable things.
It's really, I'm really grateful. And it's so nice to have met you in person as well. And it's cool, I think, that we're both sort of we've both taken a similar path, not exactly the same, but there's a lot of kind of overlaps, and I think it's really nice to see how far we've both come in like pretty much the same amount of time.
I know. So cool.
So yeah.
Cool. And I really appreciate you coming on today, because you've travelled like from the other side of the world.
We were so lucky because today is a strike day and I still managed to get 3 trains here. So
amazing.
yeah, it's cool.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And yeah, do check out Mikaela's YouTube and her Instagram. And yeah, fantastic. Thank you.
This was fun.
Thank you.